I think the next generation sucks. Mel Brooks, when asked what was the hardest thing about making movies, he said, putting all those little holes on the side of the film. Now, that was a joke that everybody, it's a funny joke, and it was something that everybody in the movie industry understood because you had that common language. But film is no longer a common language.
You know, I find that I like people who started in film. I think there's an ethic. I think there's a work ethic. I think there's just a way of working, a way of understanding film. You know, the fact that you have to understand, you had to understand a negative and an IP and the process of all that gives you an understanding of film and it's and more of an understanding of its possibilities.
Film is something that you can see on your iPhone. Technologies are so rapid that you really have to change or be more sure of your definition. The next generation. Okay, I can tell you that in my generation, I was frightened by the film schools that did exist at that point. But these were mostly geared in my day to documentarians. I mean, you didn't learn how to make a feature film in those days. That was so Hollywood. And yet I had friends who taught at NYU, one in the graduate department and one in the undergraduate department. And often I would be asked to either be a guest lecturer, which I hesitated to do because I didn't know quite how to teach what I knew about editing. And I was too embarrassed to say that, yes, it is all intuitive. It's something that I learned, at sitting on the knees of Dede Allen and Aaron Mavakian and Carl Lerner. And I was too embarrassed to say that there was something in me that probably not only made me good at what I do, but touched something in me emotionally that I didn't know about. And I didn't know how to explain that. So, instead of teaching how not to cross the axis when you shoot and edit, I was hard put to try to teach people what it was about editing that they could learn, absorb.
My first course that I did, I was really kind of scared. There's a bunch of kids who are, I didn't know quite what to talk about. We don't really have, I didn't know how to feel out a frame of reference. There's not much of a historical sense.
I asked them because there were general film courses. How many people wanted to be editors? And almost nobody raised their hand. They were so bored listening to an editor talk about editing. They could tell about anecdotes. They could ask old people about their experiences in working with great directors and producers and stars, and that really has nothing to do with editing. So I was kind of turned off by that then. But I also taught a class of inner city, they call it that, inner city filmmakers that Alan asked me to teach.
Kids from Los Angeles, they're between high school and college, late high school, early college.
They all had practical things to do, and when I polled 20 or so people in the class, I would say fully 2/3 of them wanted to be editors. Whether they really wanted to or not didn't matter. That they cared enough to know or want to know about editing and to care about the doing.
But I realized that I could sit over their shoulder and look at their cut and say, why don't you try it this way, and teach them some techniques that were taught to me by my assistant, or by somebody else, and just pass these things on. So that's, I think, the value of lamenting the loss of editing.
That was encouraging.
I think that a lot of the people today are just functioning from the computer screen, and they don't understand what goes on behind it or before it as much as we did. There's just something different in the way that people who worked in film work and think.
So many films are all about sizzle and not steak.
The work ethic has gotten a little short shrift in recent years, and it seems to be more the ethic of entitlement in the cutting room too. I think people expect to be cutting sooner. I mean, when I started, the 8-year rule was still in, and in fact, they changed it to 5 years when I first started cutting, and that was why I was able to cut at 25. Well, when you're not able to cut until you're close to your 30s, you take the time to learn the craft instead of being thrown into it, and I think that's what they're missing. They're missing that time of being around it and of being a part of the process before they're thrown into the editing job and expect to perform. Editors were more mature then, and there's great work being done, really interesting stuff being done, but I think that time to learn and not rush into it was a good thing.
They have no idea what a synchronizer is, but they're so fast with the equipment.
Right.
And I'll never be that fast.
There is a whole generation of people like Michael Kahn that still remember editing film, as Michael's still editing. They all know how to handle film, and they learned editing. They learned editing from someone that took them under their wing and gave them the time to develop, and beyond just experimenting, there were basic rules that had been developed and were utilized.
When you're editing, you're crafting every single cut, and a film editor learned to work that way because you couldn't just, throw stuff together.
I'm a teacher now at USC, teach the place that taught me. And the thing that's very interesting is the students still have the same concepts, even though with all the digital technology. One might assume that students would come to the film school, and at least for the editing side of things, already that much more advanced. And I think it's very interesting that they don't. They're still on the same level. They're still making the same mistakes that I was making way back when I was first starting film. So I think that even though the technologies are here, I think that the students still have the same learning curve that has to go on. You've got to understand how to cut the air out, how to cut to the chase, how to where the story beats are. All that stuff still has to go on, and the only difference now is that how do you learn that stuff? Do you learn it with a mentor looking over you? Do you learn it in the classroom? Do you learn it sitting on your own when you're sitting there with a digital system? Do you learn it by putting things on the internet and then people comment and say, "Oh, this is boring. This is too slow"? In other words, it's just the process of learning, I think, has changed, but I think the learning is still the same as it was.